What's really going on, everyone? Back again with yet another episode, and as Z-Way says, another iconic guest. But before we get into everything, be sure to follow us on all of our social media at WRGO Pod. That includes Instagram, X, and TikTok. Be sure to check us out wherever you listen to podcasts, but also be sure to check us out on YouTube, where you can see some of our short and long form content. Like I said again, we have another very, very special guest. He is a powerful voice for civil rights, environmental justice, and political reform. He first made national headlines as a co-founder of Memphis Community Against Pollution, leading a historic grassroots campaign that successfully defeated a multi-billion-dollar pipeline project in 2023. He was elected to the Tennessee House of Representatives, where his fierce advocacy for gun control legislation led to a very high-profile expulsion and subsequently his reinstatement that captivated the nation. Now a candidate for the United States House of Representatives, he continues to fight for systemic change, environmental racism reform, and economic justice. We welcome him, Tennessee State Representative Justin J. Pearson. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing so good being with y'all. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks
Yeah.
for that kind introduction.
Oh, of course. So we can just get right into it. Before the protests, before the national anthem, and serving in the Tennessee legislature, who was Justin Pearson? What experiences shaped your understanding of justice and convinced you that public serving was your calling?
Yeah, well, it's a longer story, but I won't take up the whole time with it. I grew up financially poor but spiritually rich. I had such amazing parents who instilled in us the value of education from literally the year I was born. But it starts in the church, where a lot of good things in my life have happened. When I was literally the year I was born, my parents heard a sermon called Vision 2000. I thought it, I caught it, I saw it, I bought it, and now I've gotten it. Preached by Dr. Alvin O'Neill Jackson, who's like my god grandfather
Yeah.
now. But at that time, my parents were 20 and 21.
Mhm.
Uh, and they had already had three sons before me, and my baby brother would be on the way 5 years later. And they decided that they would go get education. They would go earn a bachelor's degree and a master's degree to help lift us up out of poverty. But growing up, it was the struggle of poverty, right? Until my parents did have that higher education. My mom's become a teacher, my dad a preacher, a chaplain now, and comfortably, working class folks.
Yeah.
But what I understood was someone was responsible for the reason we didn't have enough money for school supplies. Somebody was responsible for the termites and the roach infested apartments. Like somebody was responsible. And growing up, I realized like, oh wait, government is responsible for all of us. And it's the only institution in this country that is. And it's our responsibility to make sure that there are people in government who actually care about people. I ran for president of my kindergarten class, right? So I'm not gonna lie and be like, "Oh, I never thought about politics." That ain't
Yeah.
me. Like, truth is, like, I thought about politics a long time. Didn't think I'd be this young in politics, but I thought about politics a long time, and always thought about it as a tool to help lift people up, particularly the people at the bottom, right? And that is where my theology and my political ideology live.
No, I love that because when you first said that you were thinking about running for president, I was like, wait, you're actually our age and we're all around 31 in our early 30s. I was like, let me check
Ain't
it
old
out.
enough yet.
I was like, hey, we can always think future forward. You've become one of the country's most, recognizable, younger activists, especially who are in kind of the public sphere and public serving leaders. How has your understanding of kind of creating change actually changed now that you're able to actually write laws? I'm sure from your perspective, there's one thing when you're, on the front lines, on the picket lines, advocating for change versus you're actually in the halls of power trying to change it from the inside. Can you talk about just kind of how things have changed for you or how actually they might not have?
Yeah, I mean, I'm literally of the two minds of being an activist dash legislator. The truth of the matter is, we get a lot of people who get into elected office who think that their job is now done because they're an elected official. And it's now the job of the people outside of the institution to go and make the things happen while they do the very best that they can inside of it, working within a system that is rigged in white supremacy and rooted in sexism and all the other isms that we know of. And that's just not me. I am not a person who wants to capitulate towards racism in order to pass a piece of legislation. That doesn't mean I don't advocate for every bill that I have. I write, they give you a set limit of bills in the Tennessee State House. When I first got there, it was 20, and then it was 15, now it's down to 10, and I fill it up every single time with legislation that I believe is going to be transformationally helpful in our community's fight to live free of the harms that we're seeing. And so I always advocate for an increase in the minimum wage, always demand that we expand access to Medicaid, right? I advocate for the things that I know are actually going to make a difference, regardless of if they pass or not, because I'd rather bring forward legislation that I know would do something than the cosmetic legislation that I see some of my colleagues pass because white people who overwhelmingly are racist like them enough to pass it. I'm just like, no, I'm going to fight for the things that I want. And that comes with sacrifice, right? All of us, myself, Representative Jones, Representative Johnson, the Tennessee Three who stood up against gun violence. The NRA called the Republicans and told them, don't ever let them pass a piece of legislation. And so they don't. They don't bring our stuff to the floor, even though it would be beneficial to their constituents as well as ours. But I would rather live in integrity and principles than, bow down to a system that isn't designed to help us ultimately. And I would also say this, you have to have internal and external strategy. And the most successful movement organizing recognizes that. And I saw that during this fight against the Calais decision and the breaking up of our district. You have to have organizers who are talking to elected officials who are talking to organizers to say what is helpful, right, toward our overwhelming strategy to elevate this issue, to show people the problem, and also to hopefully effectuate change, to stop it from happening. And that playbook got used in Georgia and they were successful, got used in South Carolina and they were successful. We had to build that playbook in 3 days, right? It was unsuccessful for us directly, but it was successful for people in the movement. And so there are still wins to happen. But I think the most important thing to realize when people get in positions of power, your job actually isn't to capitulate to the system. Is to continue to change and demand that it change on behalf of the communities that you represent. And tragically, and we're family now, but tragically, I think a lot of our elected officials, particularly young Black elected officials, get swallowed up into the system and start taking the corporate PAC money. Start getting the dinners and the invitations to these places, and that leads to capitulation. And so you can have younger people who are participating in the very same system of those who came before us, who got us into this status quo, which isn't a great one. And I think that is what I'm seeing more clearly now, and something that I keep bumping up against because that's not freedom.
Hmm.
And when you talk about freedom, I'm glad you mentioned that because you've been a leading voice when it comes to environmental justice, particularly around the conversation around pollutions in Memphis and in Black communities. So, why do you think environmental justice deserves to be viewed as an economic and civil rights issue?
Yeah, environmental justice and environmental racism, right, is at an intersection of civil rights. It's at an intersection of human rights that has to be more intentionally recognized, honestly, by our community. Because I'll be honest with y'all, when I was in college, went to a small college up in Maine, there were all these people who were, environmentalists, climate change, and all that. And I always thought they were just white people who hug trees. And I said, why don't you just focus on getting your work done? You're wasting time. And it wasn't until our community was faced with the imminent threat of $2 billion corporations, Valero Energy Corporation and Plains All American building a multi-billion-dollar crude oil pipeline in our neighborhood, that I realized, wait, environmental and climate justice is actually not about white folks hugging trees. It's about young Black girls having to have asthma pumps. Uh, and being on ventilators in hospitals, right? It's about grandmamas dying, like mine did, of cancer in their 60s, right? With a life expectancy that's much lower than the national average. And so what I know now is climate and environmental justice is about our ability to obviously withstand corporations that are targeting our communities and treating us like sacrifice zones, as Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali calls it. And it is also about the people who are being most oppressed getting the necessary language to fight back. Because I didn't know the words environmental justice. I didn't know the words environmental racism, right? Even though I'd lived and I saw what happened at Flint and these things, I didn't understand it, right? And then you start doing research and you realize African American people, 75% of us live within 5 miles of a toxic facility. That isn't accidental. Right? That is not coincidental. That is very intentional. And if you look at, and I did this myself, if you look at red line maps, and you all know redlining, right, where Black people were forced to live, because that was the only place that we'd be able to get loans. And you look at where all of the industrial parks in this country were created. And industrial parks where the largest facilities, toxic release inventory facilities operate, they are the exact same. So we were forced to live in places that they then ultimately polluted. And these very places have the highest incidences of cancer, the highest incidences of COPD, the highest incidences of asthma, the lowest educational opportunities, the lowest economic opportunity as well. And they are overpoliced and overpolluted. And so our country is designing communities to suffer where we live, where poor white people live, where Native Americans live. And I think that's why I'm in this fight so aggressively.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that because even when we talk about where homes are built and how close that they are to toxic environments, how do you see data centers and AI playing especially a role in neighborhoods for rural people in the South to Black neighborhoods? Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So with data centers, it's an amazing case study in what we can do to build solidarity across race, class, geography, political party, and all the other things because they're coming for all of us. Right? It's literally the billionaires versus the rest of us. If you are not a billionaire, you are on our team and you need to show up like it. And so 2 years ago, when my community was fighting, and it's literally my community 3 miles away from me, Elon Musk has built the world's largest data center and supercomputer, Grok. He has two other data centers that are nearby our home and one right across the border in South Haven, Mississippi. And so this is a fight I've been in for 2 years. Now everybody's talking about data centers, right? But 2 years ago, nobody was saying a single thing. So we were really at the front of these hyper scale data center fights going up against the richest man in the world. And what I was learning and what I was sharing with people then is that they're breaking the law, they're creating their own power, and they're polluting at levels that are literally unconscionable. And you can go to Oilfield Witness and look at how much pollution is coming out of these plants. It was double the amount then, it was double the amount of the international airport, right? That's in Whitehaven, a community that's next to ours. One plant is producing more pollution than the international airport, which serves millions of people a year. And now he has three of those. Right. And so we just said, thinking about the scale of pollution and damage that's being done, the number of people who are being sick, and unfortunately, and quite tragically, most tragically, the dozens of people a year who are dying due to the pollution, and particularly those with comorbidities in Shelby County, DeSoto County, which is in Mississippi, and Crittenden County, Arkansas, are all very real. But here's what's powerful. We are seeing folks fight back in rural communities. 67% of data centers are planned in rural communities, not urban communities. But in rural, urban, and suburban places, people are realizing they are stealing our water, they are polluting our air, they are taking our land so billionaires can make one more billion. And the main use cases are to take our jobs, blue collar and white collar jobs. That isn't a technological revolution, right? That is technocrat exploitation. And it really, even if people don't understand the words or say the words of a tech oligarch, right? Like they understand that this is an attempt to exploit our most vulnerable people and communities, and we don't want it. And so I'm getting notifications every single day. Another community just banned data centers. Another community just put a moratorium. Another state, New York, just put a moratorium and say, you know what, we need a year to figure out some regulation. We need a year to figure out what the policies are. I'm looking at a small community outside of Nashville that's in my congressional district that I'm running in, Laverne. They're considering new legislation. And now, finally, my city of Memphis is saying, oh, wait, maybe we should do something. And I'm just like, we were telling y'all this 2 years ago. 2 years ago. But our mayor, Paul Young, he capitulated and he was supportive of the data center. The Chamber of Commerce was given talking points to elected officials, which is why we need better elected officials and smarter people in elected office like y'all. I serve and I see people who are in elected office who don't deserve to be there. I
Mm,
mean, they don't deserve to be there because they don't have a servant's heart, they don't have compassion, but they also don't have integrity or intellect. And we need smart people who are in positions of power to help us navigate some of the most difficult challenges that we are going to see in our lifetimes. Because, people like the current president of the United States, they aren't going to live with the effects of the droughts, of the floods, of having environmental refugees by the millions in our country. They're not going to deal with those consequences. We are.
mhm.
And it's time for us to be empowered to do something about that.
No, excuse me. I totally agree. I'm here in Georgia and we have a lot of data centers just popping up. And in some rural areas they're voting against it, and then in others maybe not. And I would say that goes to how a lot of people vote, especially here in the South. And with your recent expulsion from the Tennessee House, that became a national story. And it causes us to question the health of the democracy. Do you like looking at that situation? What do you think that reveals about America, larger story and like the vulnerabilities of our like democracy?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's an experiment, right? And I think that's a really important word to use. It's an American constitutional democratic republic experiment. And that means there's no guarantee that this works, right? There's
Mm.
no guarantee that consent of the governed continues to work, particularly when you have elected authoritarians at every level of government, from the presidency to the state house. In Georgia, it was rebuffed, but they were seeking to take away the Democratic representation and Black folks' representation at the state house, the state senate, and the congressional level. That's not a healthy functioning democracy when there isn't adequate or equal representation as an opportunity for engagement. It is not a republic, a functioning republic, as some of my Democratic Republican colleagues like to say. It's not a democracy, it's a republic. It's actually a democratic republic, but let's just go with it for a second. It's not a functioning republic if the people are not selecting the people to represent them, but instead those who are being selected as representatives are choosing who they want to represent them. This is not a functioning republic, right, if we continue to operate in this way. And that scares me because this is how people who do not have our best interests at heart are able to solidify their power and put their claws into democracy until they bleed it out. And when you have 18 billionaires traveling with the president of the United States to the People's Republic of China, right? Like that should worry everybody. Right? Now, Republicans are out here trying to call Democrats communist, but the President of the United States is really making deals with communists because it's never been about Americans. It's never been about America. It's been about how they can make more money for themselves and for their future. And they're not talking about making one more million. They're talking about how do I make more billions, exploiting the public and exploiting public resources to do so. Like that's what's so angering in this moment in time. You have the richest people in the world buying the democracy because they're choosing which elected officials they want. And so AIPAC is supporting certain Democratic candidates and certain Republican candidates, right? The AI lobbyists are supporting certain candidates. And I'm not just saying with, $100,000. We're talking about 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, $60 million in elections. They're trying to buy elections because it's easier to buy one person to bend toward your will than to convince the general public that these things are good for us. I'm very worried about our country. I love this country. You see, I represent my flag. We built this country. I've been a Tennessean for 7 generations. My folks have been here since 1870. Nobody's going to take me from my home. And at the same time, I know, as you all know, and everybody who watches this knows, the truth of the matter is anytime America has moved closer towards its ideals, has been because we fought for it. We bled for it. We've died for it. And it requires that in this moment, that if we are going to preserve this experiment, it's going to require everything we've got.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you heavily kind of hinted around it, but can you explain how the redistricting efforts in Tennessee are an extension of like undermining political representation, and why people in Tennessee and just across the country should pay attention and care about that?
Absolutely. I mean, there was a big initiative after Calais decision called All Roads Lead to the South. The truth of the matter is, the litmus test for America's democracy is not what's happening in New York or Massachusetts or California, though I love those places. The litmus test for America's progress is what happens to the South in the former Confederate states and in the neo-Confederate states right now. And so if we do not invest in the South, where 56% of Black African American people live, we are setting ourselves up for failure. Let's follow a through line here. I got expelled on April 6, 2023 by this Tennessee State House of Representatives by a racist lynch mob who was upset that Black folks, young Black men in particular, were standing up against the NRA, the Tennessee Farms Association, and they wanted to put us back in our place. That same spirit is the spirit that took away the only Black majority district in the state of Tennessee after the President of the United States told them to do. to do it, capitulating almost instantaneously to racism and white supremacy, and lying and saying they didn't consider race when they broke Memphis into three districts, and went so far as to try and cover up their lie, saying, well, we only use census data to decide these maps. But you know what's really curious about that? Census data doesn't have any political affiliation, but it does say what the race of people are in the district. And so they told on themselves about why they did what they did, and it was to deprive us of political power. But when I was expelled from the legislature, it was the same thing. It was to deprive my constituents of political power because they don't want our voices to be heard. They don't want us to be able to sit in the same rooms that they sit in, challenge the policies and practices that they are pushing. They don't want us to be able to resist in any way, shape, or form, and they don't want to view us as equals. There was one Republican who said, "It makes me sick that he gets to walk in the same halls as the Tennessee greats." That is their mentality. And he's still an elected official there in the state house. Like that is their mentality. They are not hiding who they are. They are not pretending some other way. And it is our responsibility to call them out as they exist. Because we cannot fall into some soft pillow of apathy, as T.D. Jakes once said, believing that things are just going to get better, or better days are just coming. That isn't how this works. Dr. King, in his brilliance, he would say the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I just wish he had added that there are benders, right? That it doesn't, you have to be a bender.
Yeah.
And we are in desperate need of people who bend the arc. And this would be my last point on this is we should never view our time here in isolation, right? Like we're all really young. We have parents, we have grandparents, we have people who come before us. And I was sharing this with my wife yesterday, but I was like, when Harriet Tubman died, Ronald Reagan was 2 years old, right? Like this isn't so distant, right? In our history. And it's important to think, where did the hatred that enslaved people go? Where did the hatred that lynched 6,500 documented people go? And it dissipated. It did not disappear. It became a part of institutions. It became the people who were wearing black robes. It became the people who were wearing badges. It became the people who wear suits and ties into state houses and state senate. Because if they learned if we could take over the institutions, we could legalize our forms of lynching. And so the same places, and you can look this map up too, but the same places that had the most lynchings have the most lethal injections. But they learned that if we take over the institutions, we could still politically and socially and economically and environmentally lynch these communities. It's evil and it's insidious, but it's also very true. And with the breaking up of this district and across the South, what we are witnessing is the Neo-Confederacy rising and taking a victory lap.
I'm glad for your sake that you're doing what you're doing and you've read your Bible a lot better than me because I probably would have lost my mind a couple summers ago if I were in your position. And we recently had on last episode Dr. Eddie Glaude from Princeton, who I think spoke a lot about I think what you're kind of speaking on between the lines in terms of um, this work comes at some cost. And I think obviously you're very energetic. I think all of us and our listeners will be able to feel your spirit. Could you at least, say as much or as little as you want, but can you at least talk to, I think, being in these spaces has to be very difficult. You've been expelled. You've seen what the forces can do against you. Can you at least talk about your own personal journey or at least how God keeps you centered? Because I think I would have lost my mind and I like it would have been for a lot of people, they're probably saying you have a discipline about you that even the most virtuous people would have lost a long time ago. Can you at least talk about when you're in these rooms facing blatant racism, how are you able to stay on the course? Because I know me, I wouldn't. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners are asking that exact same thing.
Absolutely. Well, I love Dr. Eddie Glaude. I saw that. I was like, I do not deserve to be on this podcast following this man.
Oh, well, y'all are hitting some of the same points.
But that's very kind of you. Look, there have been a couple of times, and there are a couple of viral moments of me where I've challenged white supremacy face to face,
Yeah.
because there come moments where you can be as articulate as you want to be, You can be as kind and genteel as you want to be, and it does not express what needs to be expressed in the moment. And that's okay too. And some folks are going to disagree with me about that. My pawpaw, he had to avert his eyes looking white people in the face and stepping on the sidewalk. Uh, uh, I'm not doing that. And there are some people who think we should. And there's some older folk and some younger folk who think timidity is the answer to white supremacy, and I disagree. And that does show up too. But as it relates to my faith, someone way smarter than me, they wrote, "I love the black church, and she loved me back." Uh, all that I am and am becoming, I owe to a God of the black prophetic tradition, right? Canonized by people like Dr. James Cone, Dr. Frank Anthony Thomas, Dr. Alvin O'Neill Jackson, Dr. Gina Stewart. These are the people who have helped change, shape, and mold my thinking. And that God is always on the side of the oppressed. And so when I am facing adversity, my wife and I, we go to Psalm 37, and there's a great line in there from David. He says at the very end, I would have fainted had I not believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Right? And it's sort of a mantra for me in all of these moments. Not that these aren't difficult, because I have difficult days. I cry like everybody else. I struggle like everybody else. But when you have a calling that you are answering, you have to see it through. And the times that I cry the most, sorry, I'm getting emotional thinking about it, but the times that I cry the most is actually when I start thinking about my nephew sons. So I have a brother who passed away December 1st, 2024, tragically by gun suicide. Call 988 if you're ever struggling. He has three amazing sons who we all are pitching in to raise. I've had them the past couple of days. Let me tell you something. They have helped me wait to have children for a couple more years.
Thank you
But
for my reminder.
you know, it's just like, man, this is a lot. But every time that I think about them, when I'm in the state house, when you can see people wanting to call you the N word, but they know they can't, right? When you hear people hurting your own community members, right? When you see laws and legislation being passed in this way, I think about them. And when folks are mean, when they are cruel, when they broke up Memphis's congressional district, and I spoke out against it. It was like, this is not about me, right? This is about these children who are 11, 9, and 6 who are going to come after me. And 20 years from now, when they are 31, right, what type of country are they're going to be living in? And did I do everything that I can to make that better? Right? Like it is a holy responsibility to be alive in this moment and relatively conscious, as Baldwin would say, which I know Eddie Glaude talked a lot about. You got to give him a little alley-oop. But it's like truly, it's a privilege. It is a privilege to go through even these things, right? And to be in a position of power as a young black African American man in this country. My pawpaw couldn't read or write his own name, right? Like I don't come from money. I don't come from a whole bunch of privilege. Like my folks, as we say, because we black, my folks got this out the mud, right? My grandmamas got divorced by their husbands, raised 6 and 5 kids respectively. My parents were the babies of both of those families, and they crawled themselves to this point. And my great grandmama, she used to say, never got the chance to meet him, but she used to say, before the end of times, the bottom rail gonna make it to the top, right? And it's like that is faith. It is realizing that this is not how the story ends. And anytime that I'm speaking or talking, like that is what's in my mind, right? The reason I can still love this country is because this is not how the story ends. The reason that I can keep showing up is because this is not how the story, the reason I can take all the darts and the attacks from the right, from the left, from the center, from the top, from the bottom, from wherever, is because like I know deep in my soul, even if I don't see it, even if I don't experience the vision and the version of the world that I know is possible, that it's coming because God would end the story on a bad note.
I love that you've been talking about the different generations, whether that be in the office or even your papa to your nephews. And it's been just a reminder of the saying, if you don't know your past, you don't know your future. So over the last decade, we've seen pretty much since Obama was president, we've seen an emerging of an amazing amount of Black and brown leaders in offices. So how do you think that this generation of leaders, including yourself, is different from the past? And what do you think is still needs to be done when it comes to the Black and brown officials for the future?
Yeah. I'm gonna go way back. I'm gonna go to our civil rights movement, folks. Growing up, I've studied many different elements of the civil rights movement, not nearly as much as some of these amazing scholars that you all know and that you're surrounded by. But by the way, my dad went to Howard University for his master's in divinity. So I love y'all. HU all the way through and through. Yeah, absolutely. It helped shape me. I went to Rankin Chapel for 5 years, hearing Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, Cornell West, and like talk about Black prophetic tradition. And so that helped to infuse a lot of my thinking. In fact, Dr. Cornell West preached a sermon once, and he said, "Your mentor has to be someone you can touch. It can't be Oprah." You're talking about Oprah, right? There's got to be somebody you can touch, and that was very informative and changed my part of the way that I view my life and my family. And now I have his phone number, which is wild because I'm just like, what is life, right? But this whole thing. But look, when it comes to connecting like our generations, for me, it gives a sense of rootedness that is really important for struggle. And I think one of the most severe damages done of slavery is the disconnectedness from our historicity. Because when you don't have those names to call, those people to call, I think sometimes it becomes harder for you to realize how much you have made this place into what it is. And thus, why you get to fight for it and stand for it and demand for it to be better. Because if you are only viewing yourself as in the course of your own lineage, your own life, right? Your 30 years, your 20 years, your 40 years, that like you don't feel as deeply a part of what is going on and what is happening and what has been and what will be. And so I really think in building intergenerational connections and intergenerational movements is actually a strategy for victory. And I tell people email me all the time as a state representative, and they write at the bottom of their thing, fifth generation Tennessean. They oh, okay. And so, I respond back because I try and respond back to emails, and that right at the bottom of mine, seven, baby, seventh generation since 1870. My blood has been in the soil of this thing called Tennessee. And you know what? In 7 generations, it will still be here, right? Like, what are you talking about? Right? And why does that matter? Like that, I got that history from like my family, right? My granddaddy Curtis's people. But like it's so important in the work that I do, right? And if I didn't know that history, like I'd show up differently, right? If I didn't know that history, like you're not as tethered, you're not as grounded, you're not as connected. And I think that's why the genealogy work that people do is so important. But even if it is not a genealogical connection, the reality is the work that we must do in our own consciousness, right? Like in developing our own Black consciousness, it has to be deeply connected to an ancestral lineage. Because even if you are not a descendant of enslaved African American people, like you are a beneficiary of the work, the labor, the sacrifice that they have done and did do well before you got here. We built the country that immigrants want to come to, which is why I want to protect and defend the immigrant, because we built something that is beautiful and that is amazing that they should want to be a part of. And the fact that some people are trying to build up barriers to it is absolutely insane to me. My ancestors built an amazing country, right? That should be a land of opportunity and possibility for people. And building that conscientiousness, I think actually requires a level of intentionality and appreciation for those who have come before us that is not always there. And I fear we don't talk to older folks enough. Right? My closest friends, y'all gonna laugh, but my closest friends are 70, 80, and 90. They're like in those age ranges. Right? Like before 7 and above 70, like my sweet spot of people. Right? Like well, everybody in between, I'm working on. But like my closest friends, my wife and I, our closest friends are like 70s in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. My best friend, he passed away in 2017. He was 92. right? It's just like I have an extreme affinity for people, and here's why. Because between me and them, there are decades of life I never saw, decades of experiences I never had. And the only people that can fill me in are the people who were there.
Mhm.
And so my friend, Mr. Tappan, who passed away, he was there at the March on Washington. He gave to Dr. King and the Montgomery Improvement Association when he was a little pastor in Colorado. Who, I don't know anybody else, right, who had those experiences, who would be able to invest and pour that into me. And so it is really, really, really important that we engage with our elders and we don't just enjoy grandmama's cooking and auntie's cooking, right? Because the truth of the matter is people who are in their 60s, people who are in their 70s now, they remember. They remember, right, having to go to the back of restaurants. They remember having to draw their feet on cardboard because they couldn't walk inside of a store. I'll tell you another story. They remember having to go up the fire escape to go to the movie theater because they couldn't sit at the bottom of the movie theater because that's where white folks sat, and they threw popcorn over in protest, right? Like they remember these things, and that's living. That isn't ancient. But if we don't capture those stories, if not for posterity's sake, if we don't capture them in our hearts and our minds, we are going to be less equipped to deal with what is to come. And that isn't to trivialize. So that isn't to trivialize what we are experiencing, the lynchings of black men and black women. We're celebrating or commemorating rather the anniversaries of a lot of people who died in the movement from Sandra Bland to Philando Castile to the Emmanuel Nine, right? Like it's not to trivialize what we have endured in our short lives, but I do think it is to recognize that the endurance that got us through then is the same endurance that we are going to need now. And it is going to be the endurance that we're going to have to pass forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I just feel like we're so connected, and there's so many times and stories that go untold because we just don't simply ask the questions. But to that point, you are running for Congress. So can you talk about some of the central priorities on your campaign?
Yeah, main things on our campaign is create an economy for all, not just the billionaire few. The economy is totally rigged. That was one thing they used to say, right? It's rigged. It's just rigged for billionaires. It's not rigged, right, for you and for me. And so we have to do something like increasing the minimum wage to $25 an hour, make sure billionaires pay their taxes, and make sure that billion-dollar corporations actually invest in the communities where they're operating and don't keep getting discounts for hundreds of millions of dollars that could be going to schools, that could be going to housing, that could be going to improving the general welfare. Second thing we're talking about is we need healthcare for all. It does not make sense that in the richest country in the world, everyone does not have access to healthcare. I was on the phone with someone today who said, "Hey, I got to call you back because we're at the hospital and I got to figure out what to do about all these hospital bills." In the richest nation that has ever existed in the history of the planet, that is absolutely abysmal and wrong and immoral. Again, my faith does not connect with that. I think about Matthew 25, when you do for the last, the lost, the least of these, you also do unto Jesus, right? The Son of God made manifest in the body of Jesus, right? Like we aren't serving people well. And our body politic is failing to meet the very needs of people. And the third thing has been standing up against data centers, the people who are profiting off of our pain, taking our water, polluting our air, stealing our land, also that they can make more money and create technology that ultimately replaces people with blue collar and white collar jobs. It's going to devastate our economy. It's estimated that 15 to 30% of the global workforce is going to be eliminated within the next 7 to 10 years, and there won't be job replacements. And so I'm fighting for the government to create a federal jobs guarantee because if AI and data centers are here to stay and there's a level of permanence to them, we need to permanently ensure that the people have the dignity of work because it does matter. And guess what? In this country, there's a lot of work to go around, whether it's building more bridges or building dams, teaching students, right? Painting murals. There's work that can be done all across our communities and everywhere we live. We can say, you know what, that should be a job right there. Why isn't it? We can make it so, but we have to start envisioning that type of country. And the fourth thing is ending the gun violence epidemic. I've shared with you all how this personally impacts me, but we should have laws that make sure you have a permit to carry a firearm, make sure we have red flag laws to make sure that people who are dangerous to themselves or others don't have access to firearms. There's some sensible things that we could do to make sure that thousands of people who are dying every year from homicides and suicides don't die. And the last thing is making sure we take big money out of politics and bring government back to the people because our democracy is suffering. These folks are buying not just elections, they're buying votes. They're buying a direction. They're buying a vision for a country where they continue to weaponize, monopolize, and create more power and wealth for themselves while the rest of us suffer. And we have to stop that by ending Citizens United, stopping billionaires from bankrolling presidencies and building ballrooms, and standing up to fight for this democratic republic experiment.
And that message, you guys, was sponsored by Western League. No, I'm just playing. But I really love how you broke those issues down in digestible language because a lot of people don't get those big ideas that we talk about and throw around, especially when it comes to like campaigning. As we wrap it up, and we like to do this thing called rapid fire. So could you just tell us what's one of your favorite books? I need some water here. What's one of your favorite books what young people should read this summer?
Absolutely. Between the World and Me. That's not just because I'm talking to y'all and I love Professor Coates. But honestly, I've read that book 3 times. It gets richer every time. And I think it was in a moment like this that I read Between the World and Me. And I think for young people right now, like we should all revisit it because there are some lessons there.
It's beautiful. What's like one thing you do that's like a habit that's made you a better leader?
I am intentional about listening. And I've gotten better at it over the years. I've not always been very good at it, but I have learned that you can't learn anything when you're talking.
That's beautiful. Do you have a favorite restaurant in Memphis?
Oh my God, don't get me in trouble. But I have several. You go to Four Way, go to Cozy Corner, go to Sugar Shack, go to A&R. We got, it's particularly if you want some barbecue, we got all the good stuff.
That's beautiful. I passed through Memphis a couple of weeks ago. I can't tell you where I got some
What?
good
I could have got
food.
us at Mahogany. You know, it's the only black-owned restaurant on the river.
Oh,
Uh,
see, now I know.
next
Now I
time.
know. Do you have like a favorite artist from Memphis?
Now you really want me to get in trouble. But everybody loved Glow. You know what I mean? It's just like it just is. It just is. And my wife, she listens to a whole lot of Young Dolph. But yeah, we got a lot of good ones. And I met NLE a few times. I'm trying to get him to endorse our campaign. But yeah, Memphis has obviously we got the best music. And it's the Memphis is most mentioned of any other city in the entire music industry, in history. That's how powerful and important it is.
As an ATLian, I'm gonna have to double check that.
I mean, you can Google it. Don't yeah, Google it, or go to your public library and get an encyclopedia. You'll find the truth. And you know what? We helped y'all become who y'all are, and you're welcome.
Noah.
And I'll say the last part of the rapid fire for us. Finish this sentence. The future of America depends on what?
Us.
Ain't no better way to end it. So as we said, this has been a amazing episode. State Representative Pearson, we appreciate you for sharing your story, sharing your life, giving us a vision of, I think, what a better future looks like, and not only how it's represented in you, but how that's represented in us. As Mackenzie said, you are running for Congress, and doing that, having people over power takes actual time. Where can people follow you? Where can people donate? They couple dollars between the couch cushions. How can people get tapped in not only with you, but with the campaign? Put a little couple church dollars in there. How can people support you, sir?
Absolutely, definitely pass the tray. Go to votejustinj.com. All donations are immensely appreciated. And if you can't get financially, please donate with your time. We need 1,000-person volunteer team to win this race. It's going to be extremely competitive. The guy we're going against gave himself $1 million the first day that he announced his campaign on the Republican side. So if you can donate one shift of time to reach out to voters right here in District 9, that would be immensely appreciated. You can do that from anywhere in the country. But again, it does rely on us to save this democratic republic experiment. And so, whatever you are doing, think about what more you can do. And it doesn't have to be my campaign, but it should be someone's campaign. If you care about civil rights, if you care about voting rights, support us, be in the fight with us.
I love it. Thank you, sir.